Okay, so thank you everyone for coming in and participating in this session on trying to elect good leaders. So I just want to start off by saying that what is the ethos of this, right? So we want to not blame anyone, but try and inspire everyone. So we are not trying to say that, political leaders around the world are terrible and blah, 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 because we acknowledge the fact that there are good political leaders, but we also acknowledge the fact that there are some bad ones and anything can be improved. So we want to try and see how we can elect good leaders, because if we have good leaders, then the world would become better. So that is one thing. The other thing is that for anyone in this discussion who has a professional capacity, um, they are all speaking in their personal capacity. So it doesn't in any way reflect uh, their views on whatever professional capacity they have. And in any case, we are kind of straying away from controversial things. We are not anti-establishment or anything like that. So people shouldn't have any reservations in speaking freely. I also want to say that, while Anita and me may have put out some of these documents, our whole idea is for those to be criticized, very frankly. So we have a very thick skin. We kind of welcome all kinds of criticism. So please don't hold back. Um, and our whole aim is to try and see how things get better. So what I was thinking is that we'll break the discussion up into two halves. So one half would be to kind of have a round robin discussion on what are some of the things that you observed in the documents, or anything else you might have to say about electing good leaders. What do you see as the challenges? What do you see as the opportunities and stuff like that? And then once we are done with that, we will try and move to trying to say what are some practical steps that we think we can take, you know, say within the next 30 days, maybe, of trying to move this thing forward. Because one of the things that both Anita and me come from is that we are not academics. We want action. Right? Like, so it's not like just some academic discussion where we keep talking about it and trying to do a PhD in electing good leaders. That may be an excellent thing to do, and I'm not trying to debunk academics in any way. I think they, play a very useful function. But the thing that excites us is really action, and it may be wrong action, small action, learning, etc. But I think from that kind of stand, we will end up with something that might work. Okay. So with that said, I'll turn the floor over to Neetu, if you want to kick things off, and then Supratim, and then Anita, and then me, and then we'll just go around and around. Right?
Yeah. So thanks, Sanjay and Anita, for putting us all together. It's just, first of all, very heartening because I don't know whether I talk for Supratim, but I know that when I have these aspirations to actually be a leader or to lead in some capacity, I almost am scared to vocalize it amongst my friends, because it's not something which is very natural, not natural, but it's not something which you hear friends talking, oh, I want to get into politics, so I want to make a difference. It's almost, so I don't talk about it. It's just amazing for me to have a platform where it can be said that, yes, I want to be a leader because I want to make a change. And saying I want to make a change seems to be a very, very broad brushstroke. So in my case, what I've done is that I've sort of zeroed in on what I want to start with. So maybe it could be children's malnutrition or hunger. That's something which moves me. What also moves me is women's issues, women's empowerment, and old people, just the loneliness and the insecurity of an old person. It doesn't have to be a poor old person. It could be an old family member we all have who's somewhere living alone. So these are the things which I'm focusing on, but it's just because I want to have a point to start. It's not that tomorrow I'm not going to be interested in something else. So during the COVID, I've started doing some studies. I've started reaching out to people who can be guiding me and joining me on this path. And so that's why I'm here.
Okay, Supratim.
Okay, Supratim.
So hi, I'm Shrupatim. I'm here mainly to learn. Like I'm not an expert on this topic as Anita and Sanjay are, and so this was quite. So I do like reading up on a lot of different things, and this was one of the areas where I was quite interested in because the kind of inputs. The kind of inputs we have on this subject do have an outsized role on the kind of outcomes it has on society, and that's why like I was interested in hearing into this discussion and here listening to possibly some of the solutions or suggestions which the rest of the speakers had, and I'd be glad to make a contribution if I can.
So if I wasn't a US citizen, I think I would have liked to have stood for elections. But I actually don't want to give up my US citizenship for that, because I think I can do an equal amount of good by helping someone who would be elected, or helping someone who even wants to campaign and get elected and post their elections. So that's really my background. And after we came back to India, I actually was chief of staff to a politician. He was an MLC and then he became an MLA. And just to tell you a little bit, he when he stood for re-elections after he was focused on outcomes and I was helping him and things, he won with over 90% of the votes of the constituency. So he had no competition, right? So I am really of the thought that while we keep saying that votes can be bought, while we keep saying that people vote for caste, religion, etc., I actually believe that that's wrong. And I have this belief that people are really desperate for outcomes. And if they can see a credible person who has thought hard about the outcomes, how they're going to provide them, etc., I think they will win. But it has to be done in a really systematic manner and stuff. Now, again, I don't claim to know much about like tribal areas, rural India. I understand Delhi, and therefore I'm using Delhi as a, I'm saying that the rest of the urban cities might be like Delhi. I may be wrong.
Okay, so I just want to check. There were three things that we had talked about as things to do before this meeting. So did people get a chance to? So one was trying to look at this movie on Netflix, Knock Down the House. So I know Anita and I saw it, but Neetu and Supratim, were you able to see it?
I did see it. I saw it.
You saw it? Okay, great.
Yes.
And Supratim, were you able to see it? You're on, yeah.
I haven't had a chance to see the movie, but I've read through the documents which you've linked to.
Okay, cool. Okay, so and then there was this playbook kind of document that Anita had prepared. Neetu, did you see that as well?
So the one document I wasn't able to print out is, I think, the Delhi. So I got Win Elections in India and Boost Prosperity. I've got that. I read through that.
Right.
Then I read through the prosperity, the generic prosperity pledge, and the 10 questions for,
the civic engagement thing, yeah.
Yes. The one document, for some reason, my printer was off. I couldn't print out.
Anyway, that was not really required, right? The other one, but that's a separate topic anyway. Yeah. So I think, yeah, you were pretty prepped for this. Did you also listen to that Is Baar Sahi MLA Chuno? That's my poor attempt at trying to, like in Hindi, trying to talk. Supratim, were you able to listen to that?
I think I heard that, but I didn't get it entirely, like the entire meaning behind the whole thing. So
okay. So yeah, so I think we can go one by one. So Anita, which one do you want to do first?
Any, I mean, we could start
Okay,
by.
so let's start with the easiest one, right? So it's this is bar sahi MLA chuno. So since I actually did that, I'll just give you a very quick explanation of what that was, and then I'd love your comments and all that. So what I was trying to do there was I was trying to say that if you are a candidate, okay, who is standing for election in Delhi, okay, from a constituency, right? So how would you make like I don't know what the length of that video is, but it's probably quite short, but a fairly short video which would try and tell people that what they should be looking for while electing a MLA, right? And then follow it up with saying, here's my video as to why you should elect me, right? In there, and try and get so people in the polling booths as volunteers to help in my campaign, and maybe a campaign manager and stuff like that.
So let me just butt in a little bit over here. So one of the issues that people have is like, if they're really good and they're honest and they don't want to spend too much money on campaigning and spreading their message, right? Is that in today's day and age, you can do things a little differently rather than standing. So traditionally, and even now, most election campaigns are done in a very standard format, which is they the person who wants to stand for elections and his team stands in front of people, almost like a sabha, and they talk, and then the people around them, the residents of the area, come and ask some questions, etc., right? Now, all that's fine, but that's a very expensive way of doing things. And it's also a difficult way to do things because your message does not spread very clearly and undiluted to the other people around. Okay. So let's say 300 people attended this, right? You can, you're now dependent on their ability to understand and their communication skills to go and spread that message further. On the other hand, if you use technology, and most people today have a smartphone, so if you have these short videos of what you are, what you stand for, and why people should vote for you, right? Why am I a good candidate for you? I think these are easily spreadable, and they're cheap to do. I mean, we did them really badly, but we did them for free. We stood in front of our phones and we recorded a video, right? We didn't even edit it, right? Now, let's say I am not even standing. I'm just a good citizen who wants a good person to be elected, right? I can still make a video and spread it to all the people I know in my RWA, etc., saying, look, let's think hard about who we want to elect. And here is what I think we need to consider, right? It's just a public service, because if all of us vote sensibly, then we'll get the right leader. Of course, given that the right person, some good people need to stand.
Okay, Neetu, what are your comments on this?
So I absolutely agree with what Anita and you have sort of said, and I think that one of the ideas which came to my mind was that when you're electing a person, any person, and you're voting for that person, there is a lot of promises which is made, and it's like after that there's no accountability. So there should be, according to me, and I've thought about this very long. I said such a simple solution: pledge versus performance. So it's almost like a report card. So I pledge, for example, or I promise these 4 things I will do if I'm elected. How simple is it to be actually held accountable, and not after 5 years? Why do you give me a free run for 5 years? Hold me accountable every 6 months, whatever I done. After that, another 6 months. So I think that this accountability, which is absolutely missing till the next election, till you and me are weary of the same system and we may not even vote. So I think that for me, this accountability somehow is quite an interesting way to put forward, that be accountable. If you're doing good, I mean, hey, there's no problem. So I think that is my point
And
on
also,
this.
also, if you've shared your project plans with people, not everyone in your constituency is going to be interested, right? They don't care to know the details, but there are always some people who are interested.
Yeah,
Now,
okay, let Supratim speak now. Anita,
if you share your
come,
project, one second. If you share your
come in your turn now.
if you share your project plan, you can also share a report card saying, this is where I'm failing because of XYZ reason.
Yeah.
Okay. Supratim, you have the floor.
Yeah, so I see this more as an outsider looking in. Like I don't have an insider's view of the situation like Anita does. So I can like from my experience, I can speak like from the view of like what many of my friends think about it. And the thing is, like there is a certain lack of knowledge, I would say, about the kind of responsibilities which say each of the local level leaders have, like at the municipality level and at the legislative local level. So what happens occasionally is sometimes quite a few of my acquaintances and friends, like we don't really know at which stage the leader can deal with which sort of problems, because certain things fall under the central government, certain things fall under the state government, certain things fall under municipalities, but like a very large number of people do not cannot distinguish between those things, and occasionally we end up blaming the wrong set of leaders for things which are possibly not under their control. So I do think like there needs to be a certain
It's
level
a very good point. It's a very good point. Very good.
There needs to be a certain level of information dissemination. I'm not sure if whether this has to be top down, because a critical mass of people need to know this before it can have an effect. Because if they don't know this, then like I don't think any of my friends have ever voted in a municipal election, like because probably because we don't think it's important enough. And I think that makes sense, because like at the state level, the financial situation is very centralized, so it's effectively a top-down distribution of money, which is why most people in India don't know who the mayors are. Like I don't know what the name of the mayor of Mumbai is, or Kejriwal might be an exception because Delhi is almost a state in itself. But by and large, like the fact is that since like so many financial powers aren't devoluted enough, like it's kind of hard for people to know like who's responsible for which particular like for which particular like area.
I think very well said. Yeah, very important.
So coming back to why I thought this is, so, just giving you sort of my background and biases, I was kind of thinking like, could a person's political campaign to get elected be thought of as a startup? So like I'm going to do a startup to launch a product. So could a person's political campaign be also looked at like a startup? Now, if I was trying to do this as a startup, one of the first things that I would do would be to do a concept test, right? So this video for me is like a concept test, right? So it says कि हाँ आप कोई भी MLA चुनो, right? I'm saying कि ये 5 मांगे हैं, तो ये 5 मांगे सही हैं क्या? Like, do they resonate with you? Like, I could test this in various kind of pockets in my constituency, with the slums, with the middle income people, with the rich people, and so on and so forth. Because, see, one of the things which there's great skepticism about is, can an MLC make a difference? Right? This is what Supratim was trying to say, right? So why should I vote for? I mean, it doesn't matter who I vote for, right? So basically, people say Modi hai to mumkin hai. But what I was trying to say in the this thing, and of course, MLC is even one level lower than MLA. But I was saying, because this was meant for the MLA elections, saying acha MLA hai to mumkin hai, right? So I'll just take one very topical thing, saying that the first point was GDP dugna karo, right? So now the whole thing is, aap desh ki GDP dugna kar rahe ho, but what about my GDP as a household? Can you, the MLA, help me make my household GDP dugna? Now, how will you do that? Suppose you make my government schools better. Suppose you introduce a 10th pass course, right? So that it's very easy to pass 10th, and then in the pass course, as opposed to the honors course, they're not teaching you algebra and trigonometry and all those kind of things, but they're teaching you life skills so that you can get a job, and then you can do distance education. Now just take a small household, like 4 people, 2 kids. Now if those kids get good education for free, I save on private school, right? Sending them to private school. Now, if these people start working at the age of 16 and don't go to 12th and don't go to college, and they can take open university and learn if they have that kind of capability, but they're also earning and learning. Would that increase my household GDP? I think it would, right? As long as they got jobs, right? So that's another corollary. So what I'm saying is that for any, so we'll move to the playbook next, right? So how do you develop a playbook for winning an election, right? That was Anita's attempt to actually do that. But even prior to that, this video is a pretty good thing, like saying, hey, okay, if my concept test is very negative, right? Like, so I go around in my constituency, I say, yeah, I'm trying to tell you, this is how I'm going to run my campaign. I'll come to you, but आप ये सोचते हैं क्या कि like this video also says दो हाथ से ताली बजती है कि आप contribute करेंगे क्या मेरे campaign के लिए, right? Now, if you do that concept test and it comes out to be a failure, right? People say नहीं तो हम तो बिरयानी शराब हम किसी को नहीं वोट करेंगे, हमें कुछ समझ में ही नहीं आता है, सब लोग आके बात करते हैं, आप भी बात कर रहे हो, कुछ नहीं होगा, मैं नहीं contribute करूंगा या मैं नहीं volunteer करूंगा. Then it's a very easy, quick saying, hey, I'm not going to stand. Why should I waste my time, right? In terms of doing that. So in a startup kind of thing, we would do a concept test and say, hey, is our concept resonating or not? Right? If it's not resonating, maybe we need to go back to the drawing board, either do a different concept or say the timing is not right, for my trying to do this, why waste my time, trying to kind of do this. So that was the limited point that I had in this video. So again, we'll go around with one set of comments and then move on to the playbook in the interest of time, because I want to keep this like flowing relatively the same. We can always do much more detailed conversation later and so on, so forth, right? So Anita, your turn.
Yeah, no, I'm absolutely, for testing the concept in a very small portion, like one polling booth, right? A polling booth is 1,000 voters. You go and tell them what you're planning to do, how you show them this video, see how they react, etc., right? And then either revise it or say that this is a bad idea, depending on the feedback. But I think revising would be a better option, because sometimes it's it's how you communicate that gets left behind. And yeah, so that's it for the moment.
Neetu, your turn.
Yeah. So yeah, I think it's interesting to think of it as Sanjay, you said, a startup or a project, and the leader is or the potential leader or the potential candidate is the product, or is that putting it too vulgarly? It's not the product, because you can't change the product. Now you have the leader is fixed. It's the concept which you can tweak, with which you're presenting the leader. So let's say that there are 2 people you're trying to groom to be the leaders or stand for election. Those are the givens, and how you actually portray them or try to make them winnable, that is the strategy. So I think it's nice, because your concept can be, we can be brainstorming on what are the concept videos or concepts you go to the public with, and 1 or 2 may resonate more than the others, so it's a trial and miss and hit. And I think it's a good idea. I think I'm on board. Yeah, I think it's a great idea.
Okay, Supratim, your
So I think it's an interesting case study to look at, something worth thinking over and pondering over. I do think the outcome would be dependent on a variety of factors. Like, firstly, it would be possibly based on the income of that particular constituency, because I think there'll be a correlation between how middle class or how wealthy that constituency is with how willing they'd be to accept some novel form of governance. Because like the lower down you get in the income distribution, the more risk averse people tend to be. So at that level, like they would probably prefer something which they know rather than something which is new. So this has been like, well, I don't know of the details because I haven't been within any party system, but just simply speaking from the outside and from a lot of people I've spoken to, like those were their views, which I've heard.
Yeah, so good. So I'll just kind of summarize some of this. So I think when we're talking about electing good leaders in any place, right? So it may be any place in the world, okay? Because people get kind of lost into trying to say, oh, my constituency is different, I'm like China, I'm like India. Of course, China doesn't have elections, but whatever, and they just get absolutely confused, like, because the diversity element, they can't get past that, right? Now, I have been fortunate in working with places like Citibank and PayPal, where of course we have diversity, we recognize that, but we still build models which can be customized. So 80% of that model is standard, right? And 20% needs to be tweaked. But then you can get customizable things, right? So I think we shouldn't fall into this trap. Otherwise, we keep saying, everything is different, so I can't do anything, right? Like, because everything is different, right? So now when we're trying to do this, I think what I would summarize is that there are two difficult problems that need to be addressed if we are going to elect good leaders, at least in my mind. So the first problem is, how do you get good people to stand? Because good people don't stand because they think they're not going to win. The second thing that I think the reason that they don't stand is that they say, even if we win, we will not be effective. Because what can an MLC do? Or what can an MLA do? I'm going to be the single person, representing this constituency in a house of 70 people. Let's say I'm an independent. Now, of course, we are not limiting ourselves to saying that good leaders have to be independent, right? We could have good leaders from any political party, right? We want to encourage that. We're not saying all political parties are bad, all political leaders are bad, etc. But still, the question for good people is that, see, if you're not a good person, if you don't make a difference to your constituency, then it's not going to irritate you. You will say, cool, yeah. I mean, and even good people may say, I made the best efforts that I could. If I couldn't get results, that's okay, which is fine. But the problem is that the good people will actually be thinking about this, saying, one, will I be able to win? Secondly, will I be able to make a difference? Right. So I think we've got to keep that in mind. Now, there may be others which I would love to hear people, as when it comes to your thing, saying, what is the root of the problem as to getting good people to stand? And then after they stand, then the next question is, will they win? Because the thing is, it's a competition, right? So there are other people who are also standing, and let's assume that the other people are not good, because that's the problem that we are trying to solve. So either they have money, power, or they, caste or religion or whatever else. They're strong men, bahubalis or something like that. So how are you going to beat them? And there's one other factor, which when I was reading the civic engagement course that Anita and I are doing right now, was your own personal safety, right? How are you going to be safe, right? Like, because if there are all these bahubalis and, all these kind of things, and you're going against them, right? Will you be safe, right? And can you figure out a strategy for being safe, right? So we can't neglect that aspect of it as well. So that's the first part. The second part that's there is that how do we convince people, right, like the voters, that it is in their best economic interest and the interest of not only them, but their children and their grandchildren, okay, that they elect good leaders. Okay. And why does this make economic sense? That they should actually contribute to the campaign of a leader rather than sell their vote or not contribute, right? So I think like especially places like Delhi and all, there is a little bit of selling of the vote, but it's much less, and the people of Delhi are quite smart. They'll take your sharab and all that and then they vote for whoever, because like in the rural areas, trying to find out this particular booth didn't vote for me or whatever is probably possible, and you can take some reprisals. But in a place like Delhi, that's not really an issue, right? So, and it's very easily demonstrated with data because for whatever reason, Aam Aadmi Party won 67 out of 70 seats when they certainly didn't have a lot of pedigree and a lot of money power when they won. Now, what they did after that is a separate issue. We won't get into that. But the thing is that, so data actually shows that there is a solution. Because one of the things is, why should we be wasting time trying to find solutions to these two problems if there is no solution, right? But I feel pretty optimistic that there is a solution which we can work towards. And if we, put our heads together, we can come up with that solution. So that's like my point. Anita, your turn. Anita, you're on mute.
Yeah. So, I think, yes, I mean, I'm actually in agreement with everything that's been said so far because, we've been part of this document creation and things. But so that's why I'd like to rather focus on what Neetu and Supratim have to say.
Okay, cool. So Neetu, your turn.
So yeah, so see, there's work to be done. No, there are problems which need to be fixed. There are things which, so there's work to be done in the area, in the country, in the state. There's work to be done, and what we are actually talking of, the struggle of a person willing to work honestly, diligently, to be given the opportunity to work. That is the issue. That this is not even the main problem. The problem is that someone is sleeping hungry. The problem is that some woman is being raped. We want to address it, or people want to address it. But the problem we are talking about is that we are talking about the fact that will I ever be in a position to have that power to actually make a difference to the problem which is dear to me. So I think that what you said is, one is that there should be people who should be willing to say, I'm willing to come and try to do my bit. Then there should be a roadmap for how are you going to get such people to a position where they can do something. And for me, as a person from, similar backgrounds as everyone else today, is that what you said last is actually what is the most important for me is safety, and that mafia of corruption and muscle power which is around in politics today. That do I have the guts to put myself on the line or my family on the line, that tomorrow I'm taking on someone who's got, who's like a ruffian who talks in Haryanvi Hindi and who says कि मैं देख लूंगा आपको, मेरे को मालूम है कि आप रात को यहाँ जाते हैं, वहाँ जाते हैं. So I'm saying that it's not easy. It's not easy. So we are talking about work which needs to be done. There's no controversy in that. The work needs to be done. And I want to do that work. How do I do it? I mean, am I willing to walk, and will I be given that opportunity? So you can imagine that it's the first struggle is where will I ever reach that point where I'm given the opportunity to prove myself? So, for me, it's These are the two things. One is work, one is the opportunity, and then the last is success. Unless you're given an opportunity, you can't succeed, you know?
Yeah. So Pratim?
Yep. Thinking about all these issues, it reminded me of a long podcast I saw a while back. So it was on the Seen and Unseen by Amit Verma, and he was interviewing a person called Ashwin Mahesh. So Anita might have heard of him. So he works on urban governance policies. So I can actually send a link of that podcast. Like it's
Please
quite
do.
long. Yeah, it's about 3.5 hours long, but it's really worth it. So over there he speaks about urban governance and like how cities are publicly managed, like how why there are so many different factors which have to be considered whenever like someone in a position of power has to try to fix an issue. So I can just send a link of that maybe on the Zoom call itself, and there might be some solutions like over there, like to some of the issues which we are discussing over here.
Okay, cool. Anything else, Pratim?
No.
Okay, cool. So let's so now I just want to ask one question and then we'll move to the playbook itself. Okay, so I think one of the thing in this was that what is our belief level on, and then we'll ask the same question at the end of the thing, saying what is the belief level that a good person can get elected in India, given all the issues that we've talked about, right? So on a scale of 1 to 10, with 10 being absolutely can be done, no problem, ho jayega, to 1, which is kabhi nahi hoga. India to India hai, this is too tough. The problems are too tough. So where would you, just give me one number, like 27.5 if you're into decimals, but otherwise, you could just put that in the scale and then we'll come back at the end of the discussion.
I'm at 9. Okay.
9. Okay. Okay, Anita, that's it. No, I just want a number. Then we'll, yeah. Okay. Neetu?
5.
Huh?
5. 5.
Okay, 5. Right. Okay. And Supratim?
Was this number 4, by the way?
No, just saying that at your current stage of thinking, like asking you a survey question, very simple survey question, saying that electing a good leader in India, okay, what is the possibility, right? Saying, suppose there's a good leader, the person works hard, does whatever is supposed to be done, blah, blah, blah. But because of all the challenges before the person, the voters are not apathetic, the criminality is there, the safety issues there, the other kind of things are there, there's competition, blah, blah, blah. So where would you put that number? And then at the end of the session, when we run out of time, last question, we'll ask this question again to see whether that needle has moved or not. So Anita has left very little scope for the needle to move because she's at 9 already. And Neetu has said 5. So there's a lot of scope for it to move. So what is your number?
On a scale of 10, I would say 4. 4.
Okay. Right. So that this is very good because this is exactly what I expected.
Your number, Sanjay, your number?
So mine would be close to Anita, 9 also. But this is exactly why, so the thing is that I expected this gap actually, because the thing is that for 2 reasons. One is that we've been thinking about these issues for a very long time, right? So we've sort of convinced ourselves that it's possible, right? Okay. Now that may be because, we are in La La Land, or actually what we are saying is true, right? So one of the key deliverables that we want to try and do is try to engage with each of you, if you have the time and the interest, to try and see if we can move you up that scale. And don't just move, right, to get rid of us.
Actually, two things can happen, right? Either we would move you up the scale, or you would
we will move down
the scale.
Yeah, right. So exactly.
What happens in a thing? Yeah.
Okay. So I think what we'll move to now is the second part, which was the actual playbook, right? Which was a very sort of condensed version of the thing of how a person would get elected and make a difference. And there was a pledge and there was an annexure saying, why does it make sense? And so on and so forth. So I don't think Anita will speak on it because she wrote the playbook in there, but we'll ask Neetu. And so I think, Neetu, what you could say is that if when you read that playbook, were there any parts that resonated saying, aha, this is nice? And what were the things saying, oh, this is not going to work, or this is terrible? And were there anything missing in the playbook that you see? Because I see this personally as a very initial draft.
Yeah.
The playbook has to be much more detailed.
Yeah. So, Sanjay, to be honest, I, because I just came on board yesterday, I think, or day before afternoon. So I had a lot I had to see the movie, I had to read this. So I've read everything. But, like in the playbook, which you're talking about, the winning elections and boosting prosperity, it basically says there's a pledge, there's a polling booth, that one note, one vote thing, and delivering on prosperity. On board with everything. I had differing viewpoints on your prosperity indicators. You had mentioned GDP, schools, and such. I was wanting to add more to them, actually. The hunger index. Why should anyone in your area go hungry? Why should a woman not feel safe? So, things which were more dear to me, and especially when you're thinking of this limited size of area, easy to implement other things. So I just thought of adding more. I was in agreement with, the rough sketch. It's a very basic kind of a thing. So in agreement.
Okay. So Supratim, your comments?
But this sounds quite interesting, but I don't have much to add because I'm not so sure about this. So I'll probably hear out a bit more, and then if something comes to mind, I'll jump in.
Okay, so I'm just going to highlight a few issues which were in our mind, which may not have come across that well in the playbook, and why our confidence level is at 9 and why Neetu's is at 5 and yours is at 4. And then, like I said, at the end, we'll see whether we move the needle even a little bit or not, right? So the thing is that the first thing that we felt is that if a person puts in a fair amount of work, okay, in the constituency and understands the constituency really well. Now, what is the work that is required? Okay, so the first thing is that you have to understand the constituency, the makeup of the constituency, where the polling booths are, what are the voters like, etc., etc. What has been the past record of all the elections in that area? Who has won elections? Who has come second? Who has come third? Blah, blah, blah. Right? How are these people organized? What is the level of dissatisfaction with the current leader? Right? Because if you're going to try and, so let's say there's some person who's extremely popular, right? And you're going to go up against this guy, right? What's the chance of your winning? Pretty low, right? So we assume that, you pick a constituency where there is a reasonable amount of dissatisfaction, you have an edge, you have a USP, etc., etc., right? So that's a first level of homework. So a lot of people who stand for election, they just don't do this homework, because it's like a war. If you want to win the war, you got to do the preparation. You got to see, how am I going to go into battle? What ammunition do I have? What weapons do I have? How am I going to organize my campaign, right? In there. And that has to start. We'll amplify some of these things from the movie because I made some notes from the movie also, which I saw again. So that's the point, right? Saying that, look, if now the other piece of the homework is to say that, if I become an MLA, right, what can I do? I mean, like, what are the rules of the house if I'm elected? can I bring a private member's bill? Can I bring in some legislation? How will I, can I talk to various corporates to get involved? Will I take corporate money? Will I take individual money? How will I disclose that? And all those kind of things, right? So there is, so I think maybe the playbook needs a whole section on prep, right? Saying, before you decide to stand, like the safety issues that we talked about, the concept testing that we talked about, are you ready to do this? Because it's a lot of work, right? Because if you see, I'll give you the example of, say, getting into IIT, right? I mean, if you're not prepared to prepare for the JEE, you're not going to get into IIT. There's no way, right? So if you're going to prepare to get elected as a good leader, you've got to do your homework. You've got to do a lot of work. But I think that work is very readily doable. And why I feel that you have a reasonably good shot at winning is that your competition doesn't do this work.
So actually, this one of the key takeaways from Knock Down the House.
Anita, hang on. Hold your thought. Let me just finish. We'll come to you. Right? Okay. So that's one part of the thing. And then, the way at least we were thinking was that, the whole stuff is like a waterfall. So it's called like the waterfall effect of winning an election. So what you do is that you got all these polling booths, right? So now you try and find one person at least in each polling booth who will be your supporter, right? Because if you're going to win an election, you need a lot of supporters, right? If you can't get even one person from a polling booth.
So what do you mean in a polling booth? What do you mean? The polling booth is a physical structure.
Yeah, it's a physical structure which has 1,000 voters. So if you go into a councillor constituency, there are 40 polling booths.
Let me
roughly.
explain.
Okay. And each of them has an electoral role, right? So you can actually sit down with that, use technology, blah, 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 make your whole thing and say, okay, I've got this person, right? And then you say, okay, fine. Now you're going to be my volunteer. You resonate with the message. So what we are going to do is we are going to try and raise money for our campaign, because using this one note, one vote formula, right? So we're going to try and do that. And by the way, if we raise 100 rupees, you will keep 80 and you will give me only 20, right? So that person now has an economic incentive. And if they go around in their polling booth area, and maybe anywhere else, you don't want to necessarily restrict that, but they're basically getting it from a voter in that constituency. So they are becoming your what is called pracharaks, right? So you are following a classic model, which is like a waterfall, where you are basically going and saying, I have 40,000 voters in this constituency. To win, if I get 15,000 votes, I'm going to win, right? Because you can look at the records of the past thing, how many people vote, how many people this thing. 15,000 is a lot. Even if you get 10,000, you'll probably win. So one of these things you've got to get in your head, saying, how am I going to win this election? So a lot of people don't realize this and they don't follow a plan, right? So if you start like 1 year before your election, and if you notice in the book, The Pledge, suppose it says that win or lose, I will continue working for this constituency, right? So you have to present yourself saying, look, I am now in this because if I'm, say, a lawyer, right? Let's say I have a practice, but I'm going to spend some time because I want to get elected, and this is going to be my part-time work. Once I get elected, I will give up my practice for that period and work 100% of the time. But if I don't get elected, I'm still going to carry on with my practice, and I'm going to spend time still working on issues for the constituency, right? So this whole thing, like Anita will talk more to this, I'll pass it on to her, but she tends to believe that if she stood for an MLA election in Delhi from an area where she had worked in, it was almost 100% certain that she would have got elected. So maybe I'll turn it over to her and let her talk.
Yeah, I mean, I was also, so what happens is that when you stand, you could stand as an independent or you could join one of the existing political parties. And the interesting thing is that existing political parties give a lot of importance to winnability. They want winnable candidates, right? So the very fact that I could have gotten a ticket with either the Congress or the BJP also gave me the confidence that I'm a winnable candidate, because otherwise I was nobody. They knew that I was like squeaky clean, honest, and all that kind of stuff, but they saw me as being winnable. So I think now, the question is, how do you convince people that you're a winnable candidate, that you're a candidate who's outcome focused, who they need to back? Why do they need to pay 100 rupees, right? I mean, what will that candidate do if he gets elected or even doesn't get elected? How am I going to work in this constituency? Here is my plan, etc., etc. And this is how you're going to have to help me also, right? Because clearly all the stakeholders have to be involved. I think if the plan is done really well and you don't come out of nowhere. Most people I know who've stood for elections come like 2 months before they suddenly, stand for elections. It doesn't work that way. People are not going to, in the current system, I've never heard of you. I don't know what you stand for. I don't know what you are going to do. How are you going to do it? And you just come and give some bhashan on the stage. Forget it. I'd rather vote for one of the existing parties where at least something can happen, right? So you have to address all these things. And I think these are all very addressable.
Let's move on to Neetu.
Yeah, listen, I mean, the reason I'm here is I'm pitching my hopes on your 9-point thing. I'm at a 5, but willing to be pulled up to 9 and absolutely on board. I mean, I'm in it, whether, I stand for it. I mean, basically being a person who's never been politically out there, I'm also happy to, in my mind, saying, is there a way to get nominated in the Rajya Sabha, to the Rajya Sabha? Does that give me actual power? So I mean, these are the thoughts which come to mind, only because fighting an election seems to be such a leap of faith at the moment from where I'm sitting. But when you say that it requires a year or a year and a half's preparation, it's like a battle plan which you choose your ammunition. It's interesting for me because you've broken it up. You have thought about the little things, and it seems that maybe there is a way, a planned way to move forward.
Yeah. So I just like to make one more point. I think an assumption that we've made, and this is borne out a little bit by Anita's work, is that, one can say that the Indian voter is not rational. I think that is wrong, right? At least for the urban Indian voter, we think they're very rational and they are willing to listen and they're willing to think and they're pretty intelligent. Okay, so I think it's the onus is on the candidate to appeal to them, to their rationality, to their this thing, and then prove to them that they are solid. And so Anita has worked with slum dwellers, with various things, got people to do things and various stuff. So that has sort of reinforced our belief that
and there's another thing that
is very rational.
So there's another thing that's reinforced my belief. Okay, the bulk of the voters who actually come out to vote are the poorer people. Okay, and the lower income groups. the very affluent and things are harder to convince because it's harder to get them to watch anything, to listen, etc., right? They somehow have more apathy and things. So if you can convince most of the voters, right, the bulk of the voters, who is this lower section, who actually spread your message if they're really convinced, right? To me, it doesn't sound like such a difficult. They live in close proximity. They're desperate for outcomes. Things like that.
Yeah, I'd just like to add one point to this, what
Right.
Anita was saying, because I was like more an observer when she was doing all this. So one of the things that I observed was that a lot of the people who live in the slums and are the poorer people, they are actually delighted that a person like Anita is coming, spending so much time listening to them,
No, and not just
talking.
listening to them. I went down to the level of, like, when we were fixing the community toilets, for example, I went down to the level of the contract, right? Now, then they know that you mean business, right?
I think they also are, I think they're very astute in sensing empathy and actual intention. I think they are
Yes.
very astute. So they know that this person is not just, pata lag jata hai. They know.
Yeah. And
They
also
know.
in the playbook, I think the other aspect is that I think what Anita's work has shown is that even if you're not an elected person, you're just an activist, you're just a well-meaning person, you can get a lot of things done, right? Just as an elected person, because you have a more power and a position, so you can go to the councillor, you can go to the press, you can go to corporates, etc., saying that I'm this thing, which is a little harder to do as an individual. But so if you can make that message that, look, I will actually do things for you, even though I'm not elected, and elect me, because then I will do more for you. Not because I don't want, it's not that I'm saying just elect me, but it just gives me the
platform,
the standee to be able to do something, more in terms. So Supratim, any comments? And then we'll move on to the last part. We're a little over time, but
I actually, how
you
much
have to go?
I have to go because I have to meet someone in Khan Market at
Okay.
12:40, and I'm
Okay.
sitting in Gurgaon.
Okay, so
so
then
why don't we hear Supratim if he has something to say?
Yes,
And we can always reconvene, because these are very long discussions.
Yes,
so let's do that. So just Supratim, you can say something, and Neetu, did we change your score at all a little bit, or are you still at 5?
Today at 5. Today I'll end at 5.
Okay, good. Okay.
So I wanted to say that, like, effectively, possibly a handful of the reasons why the wealthier and the upper middle class sections don't want to vote in these elections is because they already have a private provision of private goods, whereas, like, on the government side, like, there are many things which they can't do in terms of providing access to public goods, which after that become private goods, which these people have access to, like, in terms of, like, private water connections, like private schools, private hospitals, and so they're effectively disconnected from the system, right? Because like, how many of them, if you ask them, like, how many, like, of them who actually have the funds would be willing to go to a publicly funded place? So you could say, like, that thread of responsibility is cut off, so it would be difficult to get them back into the system, because part of the reason for the apathy from their end is because they're putting a lot into the system and it's not coming out in the form of outcomes. So, like, that I don't think it has any short-term solution to this. I think it's a long-term thing. It'll probably take somewhere in the region of 10 to 20 years to, like, deal with some of these issues, and I think it can be fixed. It's just that it won't be fixed anytime soon.
Okay,
So
got it. And you are still at a 4, right? Correct? Yeah, okay. So that's cool. So we will stop now because we are out of time. But thanks all. Neetu, you could have see this movie. Oh, you saw the movie, right?
I saw the movie. I've seen.
So
very nice. Very nice.
We'll have a discussion on the movie thing as a separate session, maybe for an hour. And then, so the next step would be to have a discussion on the movie. And Supratim, can you get access to the movie? It's on Netflix.
Yes, my family has a Netflix account, so I can have
Okay, and then you can also see if this kind of interests you and you want to be part of it and stuff like that.
Although in the next few weeks I might be a bit busy, so I may not be able to come in for all your sessions. But if I have the time, I'll drop by.
So we'll kind of fix a session where the three of us are okay, and if you can join that, you're welcome. To join. And we'll kind of, but that next session will be on discussing the movie.
Perfect,
right?
perfect.
Okay, cool. Okay, thanks all.
Thanks,
thank you,
Sanjay.
everyone.
Thanks, Anita. Nice to meet you, Supratim.
Thank you. Nice to meet you, Anita, Sanjay. And do like if you have about 3 hours to spare, do have listen into that podcast, because it does
we will.
take a lot of things.
We have a lot of time.
Supratim, can you send a link on the WhatsApp also? Because
Anita sent it.
You've sent. Okay. Thank you.